Thank you, Dennis. My name is David G. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic, sexaholic. Recovery date in both programs, AA August 8th of 1994 and SA October 1st of 2019. Really grateful to be here with you guys each week, getting to come out and share experience, strength, and hope in the big book as I had learned it from several men in my life. Several men have been put into my life to help me work through the steps of this book many times. But one of my very first ones was Charlie, of Joe and Charlie. And I valued that relationship, and Charlie's a good man. He passed away in 2014. And, at that time I had just kind of carried on with the book studies for some time. But, having come into SA about 13 months ago, it just come around to where, I was able to come over and do this on Sunday afternoons. And it's been a great blessing for me. And I'm sure grateful for all of the people that I've met here. Gosh, there are so many on this call today that I just love. Brothers and sisters, both. Dennis, I want to always thank Dennis. He does so much behind the scenes for all the meetings. I mean, more than anybody really knows. A lot of people come to the SA fellowship and they get better. No doubt if they do this work. Some people come to this fellowship and the fellowship gets better, and that's Dennis. And I'm just grateful for you each week being here and making sure that this goes on. The easy part for me is to show up and share experience, strength, and hope. Dennis does the work. So thank you, brother. Appreciate you. We've been journeying through, I think it's about 16 weeks now with this big book study, and we have made it up to chapter 6 into action, page 72 today. And we've looked pretty close at these directions as we've come through. We've looked at the problem, we've looked at the solution, and now we're looking at the action steps to stay in the solution. And, what a beautiful part of the book this is. By now, if we follow directions, we have written the inventory as it's outlined in the big book, then we begin to have quite an experience here. We've begun to get free. The man that I am going through these first 4 steps is not the man that I will be going through the last 8. That's guaranteed. People through the years would always say things to me like, by doing the 4th step, I learned who I was. And for me, that wasn't so much true. Whenever I seen those things in the inventory with resentment, fears, and conducts, it showed me who I wasn't. The man that emerged from that in these other steps is the man that I've always been. So I'm very grateful to share my experience in this part of the book. Anything I say here today that doesn't go along with your experience or anything that your sponsor has told you to do, your sponsor is right. I encourage you to do what he tells you to do. My experience has been from the big book, and I just do not veer from that. And so with that being said, we're going to pick up right here in chapter 6 today into action. And we're going to go through and see how far we can get. And again, thank you for being here. Chapter 6 into action, having made our personal inventory. Now, this is assuming we've done it. What shall we do about it? And that was my question as well. Now, I knew step 5 was coming. I'd read off the wall the first day that I ever went into a meeting, a recovery meeting. I read up on the wall the 12 steps. And I think it's a great thing what they done. They put those steps up on the wall in every clubhouse all over the world. What they failed to do was to tell a lot of us that the instructions to work those steps are inside of this book. And so when I read down through it and I looked at number 5 and it said, we admitted to God, ourselves, and another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, a lot of fear popped up in me. I thought, there's no way I'm ever telling somebody all the things that I've done in my life. That's just not going to happen. I read on down a little further and I got to the amends portion where it said we made direct amends to all the people we had harmed. I just thought there's no way. Had not somebody been there to put me into this book and showed me the simplicity of working these steps, I don't think I would have ever made it just by reading them off the wall. They scared me. So we want to take a close look at number 5, and let's see why we shouldn't be afraid. It says, we have been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator, and discover the obstacles in our path. Now, if you'll remember, when we studied There Is a Solution, we looked at a man named Carl Jung, and we looked at a man named Roland Hazard that had went and spent a year with Dr. Carl Jung. And we'll be looking at that here in just a second. But there were some things that he told him that was vital for him to have this spiritual experience. The same thing that happened for Roland, which the book says he became a free man he lived sober from then on, is the same thing that's going to happen to us if we do this work exactly as it's laid out. And right here we get a first peek into this, why I did all of that work in the inventory. Why did I have to go through all that and look at all that? I mean, you hear that over and over and over. Why do I have to dig all this up? Why do I need to look at this again? And it tells us right here in this sentence, we have been trying to get a new attitude. Now, I don't know about yours, but I know about mine, and it wasn't very good. And a new relationship with our Creator. Not that I didn't have a relationship. I needed a new one. I needed a new experience. The set-aside prayer says a new experience with all these things. But the biggest thing is I needed to discover the obstacles in my path. If lust is the problem, if acting out is the problem, just don't act out and there shouldn't be a problem. But if you stop acting out and this thing drives you insane until you act out again, then you probably have more than one obstacle in your path. We've admitted certain defects. Now remember in the fourth column, now, we took a close look at that whenever we went through resentments. The book says we have ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We've put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now, these are about to be cast out. That is probably one of the greatest promises in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. These are about to be cast out of where? Out of my consciousness. It's going to be gone. If you'll hold your place right there, and let's go back over to page 27, and let's see what Carl Jung told Roland Hazard that he needed in order to have this vital spiritual experience. And let's see if it don't match up with what we just now read. Middle of the page. He said, yes, replied the doctor, there are exceptions. Cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics, lustaholics, have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. Now, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of a huge emotional displacement and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes. Remember on page 72, we just read, we're looking for that new attitude, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, and here it is. They are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. And if you'll come back to page 72 where we were at, as we looked at that promise right there, in my opinion, the greatest one in the book. Now, these are about to be cast out. The very experience that happened for Roland has now begun to happen for me because I have done the work outlined in the book, and I'm up to this point with a sponsor. And by this point, I'm getting free. Now, this requires action on our part. Which when completed will mean that we have admitted to God, ourselves, another human being, the exact nature of our defects. Now, we're going to want to look close at this because a lot of people, and myself included, for a long time, I felt that every time I sat down with the sponsor, I was going to tell him the dirtiest, filthiest, glorious things that I'd ever done. My book tells me that's not what the purpose of this step is. And my sponsor made it very clear that we're not going to be talking about a whole lot of that stuff. We're going to be looking for the exact nature of your defect. It doesn't matter to me what you did. I want to know what brought pleasure in you to doing it to the point of bankruptcy, your family being gone forever, all of these things that you continue to do over and over and over. That's what we're looking to do. The book says this brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapters. Now, this is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects with another person, not our filth, our defects. We're going to take a look at those things that was outlined in the fourth column, and that's it over on the resentment side. When we get into the fears, we're going to take a good close look at that and why they came about. And in our conduct inventory, we're going to be aimed at our conduct. We're going to look at the exact nature of the defect. Now, we think we have done well enough in admitting these things to ourselves. And I used to say that all the time. God knows about this and I know about this. We don't really need to bring anybody else into it. No, I think it's a great act of humility, and it's been a universal spiritual principle for as far back as man has been around, that you always do it with somebody else. There's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find a solitary self-appraisal insufficient. That's why I'm not going to do it by myself. It's insufficient. It's not good enough. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled to discussing ourselves. Now, see, it doesn't say that we're going to discuss others. And for a long time there, I wanted to sit down. I wanted to talk about them. I wanted to bring them into it. Now, this is what they done, but I'll tell you what I done. He didn't want to hear any of that. He didn't want to hear anything about them. He only wanted to hear about me and my defects. And it tells us right there that we're not going to be discussing others. We're going to be discussing ourselves. When we see good reasons why we should do so, the best reason first. Now, not all promises are good in the big book, and here's one that's not really that good. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking, lusting, and sexual acting out. That's a promise. So that's the best reason why I need to do this step, because if I don't do it, there's a good chance that I'm not going to overcome what I'm here to overcome. And I don't know about you, but I know about me, and I'm here to recover. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they have turned to easier methods. You'll hear it all the time. Just go to meetings, double up on your meetings, do this, do that, do all this. The book says, no, we're going to have to do this. We can't avoid this humbling experience. We cannot turn to easier methods. The easier, softer way always gets most of us back into our disease again. If you look at the promise at the top of 73, almost invariably they got drunk or they acted out again. Now, having preserved with the rest of the program, in other words, the first 4 steps, they wondered why they fell. And we think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory, step 4, all right, but they hung on to some of the worst items in stock. And I know in the very beginning I tried to do this, and man, I paid for this dearly in AA. I relapsed and almost never, ever made it back. They only thought that they had lost their egoism and fear. That's dangerous for me. They only thought that they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty in the sense of the word. We find it necessary until we told someone else all our life stories. And we're not talking about a treatment center life story. We're not talking about all this, we're sitting down and writing a whole life story and just running over here and reading it out. We're talking about the life story as outlined in step 4 that we did in the work of this book. Remember back on the page 65 there at the bottom paragraph. Let's take a look at that. If you'll hold your place right there, you'll come to page 65 and you'll drop to the very bottom paragraph in this book. It says this: we went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. So when it's talking about a life story over here on page 73, it's not talking about a treatment center life story. It's talking about the life story as outlined in step 4 of this work. More than most people, the alcoholic lives the double life. I used to sit in AA meetings, do book studies all across the country with another guy. And we'd sit here and read this. In the back of my mind, I knew lust was killing me. Nobody else knew it, but I knew it. And I was very much leading a double life, not only outside of the rooms of that fellowship, but inside of the rooms of that fellowship as well. He says he is very much the actor, and very much was true. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. I can remember those guys just praising me and thanking me and doing all this stuff. But in my heart, I knew, like the book's about to say, I did not deserve any of this. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, and I did. I wanted to be known as a guy that was good and had worked the steps and had a spiritual experience and was helping other people to find recovery and this and this and this. But in the back of that side life there was lust and there was sexual acting out. There was being a predator. There was all of that stuff was going on, and it was killing me on the inside, and I was dying inside of those rooms, and I didn't know how to get out. And I would read this and I'd think, my God, it wasn't until I come to SA and I met you good people and that you begin to share with me and me with you that I could sit down and read this book, and I didn't have to run and hide anymore. Today I can say I was that man. There again, I didn't do this work to find out who I was. I did this work so I could find out who I wasn't, and who emerged from that is the man I am today. The inconsistency is made worse by the things that he does on his sprees. Oh my God, those acting out sprees were terrible. I relapsed for 25 years. Coming to my senses every now and again, I would run back through these steps with somebody. I'd get a little bit of freedom. I'd think, man, I'm doing good. I'm on my way out. And the next thing you know, there I am. I'm acting out again. The book says he's revolted by a certain episode he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. I stayed full of fear all the time. I had to cover my tracks everywhere I went. I got us run out of East Texas. I got us run out of Montana. I don't know how many states I got us run out of because of my acting out. And I would go to my friend and I would sit down and I'd tell him with the most sincere apology that I could make to him. I'm so sorry that this happened. And, I'm going to get a handle on this and I'm going to do better. And I just never could. So as fast as I could, I'd push those memories far inside of myself, hoping that they would never see the light of day. I was under constant fear and tension. That made for more acting out and more acting out and more acting out. I just could not stop. So psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We have spent thousands of dollars for examinations, or my tribe has here in Oklahoma. We know but few instances where we have given these doctors a fair break. I never would tell the truth about all of that. I'd come clean with some of it, but I would never get honest with anybody like I'm going to have to do sitting down, getting ready to do this. It says we've seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. Small wonder why many in the medical profession have a low opinion of alcoholics or sexaholics and their chance for recovery. Remember the example of Roland Hazard. But here's our direction. We must be entirely honest with somebody if we expect to live long or happily in this world. Rightly and naturally, we think well before we choose the person or persons with whom we take this intimate and confidential step. Now, for many years, I've done this step with a person. It wasn't until the last time that I came through this work and I applied this work to myself in an essay that I sat down with more than one person and took this intimate and confidential step. I needed to do that. It was important for me, not only to run that by somebody who was in AA, but it was very much important for me to run that by somebody who was in SA. And that's what I did. What a great experience that turned out to be. Those of us belonging to a religious denomination, that doesn't apply to me, which requires confession must, and of course will want to go to the properly appointed authority whose duty it is to receive it. I think that's a very good direction there. I really do. I encourage anybody. I've sponsored guys that are of the faith and, they've come to me and asked me about that. And I told them, you know what? I'm not your higher power. You have a talk with him. And if that's what you feel like you need to do, I encourage you to go do that. And a lot have and have found relief. So though we have no religious connection, we may still do well to talk with somebody ordained by an established religion. We often find such a person quick to see and understand our problem. But of course, sometimes we encounter people who do not understand alcoholics, sexaholics, and I find that even inside of our fellowship. If you have not done this work, then it's going to be hard for you to understand that. If we cannot, or we would rather not do this, we search out our acquaintance for a closed-mouth understanding friend. I can remember my sponsor telling the story of wanting to go to Mexico and find somebody who couldn't speak any English and then killing him in case he ever decided to learn. Another guy I talked to one time wanted to tell it to his dog. And I mean, they just went through all this different stuff with the people they were going to do this with. For me, it's been important to do it with a man who has led me through the inventory because he already has a pretty good idea of my behavior and my conduct. So it's important for me to do that with him. Perhaps a doctor or psychologist will be the person. It may be one of our own family. For me, that wasn't an option. But we cannot disclose anything to our wives or our parents which will hurt them or make them unhappy. And that's going to be our direction in step 9 as well when we get over to there. That sentence right there is going to very much apply to that. We have no right to save our own skin at another person's expense. Such parts of our story we tell to someone who will understand, yet be unaffected. The rule is, and I used to hear in meetings all the time, there are no rules in the fellowship. Well, here's one. The rule is we must be hard on ourselves, but always considerate of others. And that is definitely the approach that a good sponsor will keep pulling you back to that over and over and over. Notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one who is so situated that there is no suited person available. Now, if you go to very many meetings If you're connected to WhatsApp, if you have a sponsor, or you know somebody who does sponsor, this don't really apply so much now as it did back in the day when this book was written. There is always a suitable person available. It says, if that's so, this step may be postponed only. However, if we hold in complete readiness to go through it at the first opportunity. We say this because we're very anxious to talk to the right person. And that was my experience as well. I wanted to talk to somebody, but I wanted it to be somebody who understood and was able to give me good feedback. And by the grace of God, I found that. It's important that he be able to keep a confidence. It's very important. I'm definitely not going to trust telling my life to somebody who I don't think will. And it's also important that he fully understand and approve what we're driving at, and that he will not try to change our plan. But we must not use this as a mere excuse to postpone. In other words, doing my fifth step. Now, when I decide who is to hear my story, I waste no time. I got a written inventory, so that tells you what I'm going to have to bring with me when I come to see him. I'm not going to just show up and sit down and go have a talk. I'm going to bring that inventory. We're going to sit down and we're going to rifle through that inventory, and we're going to look at the exact nature of my wrongs. He says we're prepared for a long talk. I know the last time that I did this with a man from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, we sat down for, seemed like 7 to 8 hours and talked about this, because I completely went back through my life again. And I had done this work just like I was a brand newcomer. And this was just not very long before I walked into the doors of SA. We explained to our partner for what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we are engaged upon a life and death errand. That's a promise. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. Well, there's two parts to step 5. And the first part is that we're going to sit down and we're going to have a long talk with somebody. And we're going to talk about the exact nature of my defects. And I'm going to roll through this inventory, and I'm going to talk with him, and we're going to go through all of this stuff. That's the first part of the 5th step. The second part of the 5th step is where I go home by myself, and God and I have a sit down together, and that's about to come up. But before I'm willing to do any of this, before I'm willing to talk to that man, or before I'm willing to go home and sit down and have a good long talk with God and reflect on some things, there better be some kind of a payoff in it for me. I'm still selfish and self-centered. So I want to know, what am I going to get out of this? Well, this paragraph right here is going to tell us exactly what we can expect as a result of doing this 5th step. We pocket our pride and we go to it, eliminating every twist of character. That's a 5th step direction. Every dark cranny of our past. Now, once we have taken this step, withholding nothing. In other words, I'm not going to hold nothing back here. Everything that I swore that I'd go to the grave with is coming out during this time. Now, if I will do that, let's look at what the promises are. I am delighted. It's been a long time since I've been delighted. I don't know about you, but it had been a long time for me. I can look the world in the eye. Look at that promise. I had never been able to hold my head up and look you in the eye for very long, maybe for a minute or so, but not very long. I couldn't look in your eyes, and I couldn't talk to you because I knew who it was hiding behind this. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. My God, what a promise. I mean, I sponsor guys all the time that are single in this fellowship, and that's one of their biggest fears, that they'll never find anybody, that they will never be able to marry and have a good life. We can almost assure you that you will. But the book says this: we can be alone at perfect peace and ease. And that's a beautiful promise. Look at this one. Our fears fall from us. Man, I had a list of fears over there in that inventory that was unreal. They fell away. They fell away right here. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. Probably one of the greatest promises of this step for me was that right there. I began to feel the nearness. It wasn't so much in my head anymore. I could feel it within my heart, within my consciousness. I began to feel the nearness of my Creator. Now, I may have had certain spiritual beliefs in these first 4 steps. Past that, coming clean with you and moving into the rest of these steps, I will have begun to have a spiritual experience, not just a belief. That's why we agnostics, we tell you when you come in here, it doesn't matter what you believe. We don't even care if you believe. Experience here in the chapter power, not any power, that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. We start getting a bird's eye view of that happening for us right here. Look at this one. The feeling that the drink problem, the lust problem, the acting out problem has disappeared will often come strongly. I don't know about you, but that's the greatest promise that if I don't get anything else out of any of this, if I get that, then I've got the deal. The feeling that that problem has went away will often come strongly. We will feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Man, that's beautiful. That's me and God. It's me and God, and it's me and God and you. It's just beautiful. So I've done that part of the step. I've sat down and I've admitted all of these things. And now I'm going to come home and I'm going to spend some time with God. And we're going to do that right here. Now, once I've finished that, I come home, I find a place where I can get quiet for an hour. And I'm going to go within myself. And I really haven't known how to do that up to this point. But I'm fixing to be led through to show how to start turning within and to start reviewing things from the inside of me. And this is what it says to do. I'm going to carefully review what I have done. In other words, in these first 5 steps, I'm going to take a close look right here. Returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. So within, I'm going to go within for an hour. I'm going to carefully take a look. I'm going to review what I've done in these first 5 steps. Here's my prayer. I'm going to thank God from the bottom of my heart that I know him better. That's the first thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to take this book down from the shelf. I knew a guy that once put it on the shelf and took it back down so he could follow absolutely to the letter. I'm not going to get into all that. But it says we take the book down from our shelves and we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. So if you'll hold your place, and you'll flip over to page 59. We're going to bounce back and forth right through there for just a couple of minutes. And let's take a look at some of these questions that I'm going to carefully review as I spend this hour with God and I. I've already dumped all of this out. I mean, it's all out there now. It's not a secret anymore. It's out. Another person knows now. Now look at what it says on page 75 there, holding your place on 59. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, in other words, the first 5 steps on page 59, we're going to ask ourselves this question: have I omitted anything in these first 5 steps? In other words, I'm going to run over here to page 59. If you'll flip over there and hold your place, I'm going to look at step 1 and I'm going to say, I admitted that I was powerless over alcohol, lust, and sexual acting out, that my life had become unmanageable. Is there anything I missed here, God? If there's anything, please bring it to mind so that I can share this. I don't want to keep anything in. It's all out. I want it all gone. Please, if there's anything I missed, bring it to my attention. I'm going to sit there quietly for just a little bit. If something shows up, I'm going to jot it down in a notebook to the side of me so that I can talk about that with my sponsor. If nothing comes in, I'm going to look down at step 2 and I'm going to say, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Is there anything I missed here, God? And I'm going to follow that all the way through these 5 steps. I'm going to sit quietly. I'm going to ask myself the next question, the next question, the next question. And once I'm satisfied, I'm going to come back over here to page 75. I'm going to drop down to where we left off. Remember, we are building an ark through which we shall walk a free man at last. Remember, we've been building the ark. We have the cornerstones. We have the keystone. And we've been building this ark. And the reason that we've been doing all of that is so that we can walk a free man. If you remember in Roland's story, he walked a free man at last. This is going to happen for us as well. Is our work solid so far? The first 5 steps. Is the work in those first 5 steps solid so far? If they're not, then I'm going to need to stop right here. I'm going to need to get with my sponsor, and I'm going to need to clean that up before I move on. Are the stones properly in place? The cornerstone, the keystone, are they properly in place? Have I skimped on the cement? Remember back on page 17, it talked about the cement. If you'll hold your place there for just a second, you'll jump back over to page 17. Let's take a close look at the cement. We want to be sure here 3/4 way down the page, he says, unlike the feeling of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster, remember that promise, does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element, and he's talking about the fellowship there, one element in the powerful cement which binds us, but that by itself would have never held us as we are now together, as we are now joined. Let's go back to page 75 and let's ask ourselves this question. Have I skimped on the cement? Am I making meetings, but I'm not practicing the program of recovery? Am I working the steps through the book, but I fell out on where am I at with service? What about that one? Am I doing good there? Where am I at? Have I skimped on the cement, put into the foundation, which was step one? Have I tried to make mortar without sand? Because if I have, there's going to crack show up sooner or later. And for me, that means relapse. I want to be thorough through here. If I can answer to my satisfaction those questions on page 59, then I'm going to take a look at step 6. Now, we have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Am I now ready to let God remove all the things from me from which I have admitted was objectionable? Remember those things in our 4th step that we looked at, as we looked at the 4th column, as we looked at the 5 questions over on page 67, as we looked at the fears. Am I ready to let God remove those things from me? Can he remove those things from me? How big is my God? Can he do these things? If that answer is yes, I'm going to take a look at this next sentence. Can he now take them all, every one, not just a few? I hear people say that all the time. I took this back and took that back. At this point, we're wanting to let it all go. Keep that cleaned up in step 10 daily. But look at the prayer. A lot of people know about the 3rd step prayer and the 6th and the 7th step prayer, but this is our 6th step prayer. And this really applies. If we still cling to something that we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And I have done that over and over and over through the years. There have been a lot of things that I've been unwilling to let go of. Does that mean that I can't move on to step 7? No, absolutely it does not. But it means that I'm going to have to do some work here. I'm going to ask God to help me be willing to turn loose. God, give me the willingness to become willing to let it go, whatever it is. Once I feel okay with that, I feel at peace, I'm going to do this. When ready, I'm going to say something like this. And by this point, I'm on my knees again. I'm doing this prayer. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. Now, see, I never considered that. I just wanted him to have the bad. Why would he need the good? Well, my idea of what's good for me and his idea of what's good for me is 2 completely different things. It's kind of like my automobile out there. I could go out there and I could take the positive cable off of my battery, and I promise you that it will not start. I got to have the good and the bad removed. I pray that you would now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way. So you see, he's not going to take them all. It tells me right there. He's only going to remove the ones from me that stand in the way of my usefulness to him and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. In other words, your will. Notice this word right here. Amen. If you'll look back with me real quick over on page 63 and hold your place right there. Middle of the book says we were now at step 3. Remember when we went through that prayer, we said that prayer together. There was no amen at the end of that prayer. Whenever you close out a prayer or I close out a prayer in the spiritual sense, we always say amen. There was no amen here. The reason why, there was prayer and action, prayer and action, prayer and action all the way through steps 4, 5, 6, and now 7. Come back to page 76. Now we're going to close out the prayer. Amen. We have then completed step 7. So in 1 hour, from the time that we do the 5th step, in 1 hour, according to the directions in this book, we will be in step 9. Now, if we went through our hour, we have looked at this directions on step 6 at the top, and we have said this prayer. We're going to look at 2 more sentences here, and then we'll back up and catch them again next week, and I'm going to stop right there. But it says this: now we need action and more action, with which we find that faith without works is dead. Let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all the persons who we've harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Let's pay real close attention to these 7 words. We made it when we took inventory. That list is with us. So 1 hour after step 5, we're going to be in step 9, according to the directions of the book. And now I've got right with God in steps 1, 2, and 3. In steps 4 through 7, I've got right with myself. In steps 8 and 9, I'm going to get right with you. In step 10, I'm going to continue to get right with me every day. In step 11, I'm going to continue to get right with God every day. And in step 12, I'm going to continue to get right with you every day. Beautiful processes outlined in the big book. This is how we recover, not just stay sober. And thank you for letting me share today, Dennis. Glad to be here.